All right, grid is really interesting. You can do display colon grid, and most browsers would now support this. Grid reminds me of back in the old days where people were using table. If Flex was a one-dimensional way, yes, you can wrap things around and have it, go down. But if Flex was more of a one way, like laying out items from left to right or right to left or top to bottom, Grid is more of a two-dimensional approach. But you can think of it kind of like back like the table. Imagine you had a giant table or like an Excel spreadsheet and you say, okay, on this row, I'm gonna put this, on this column, I'm gonna put this, and then on this one, I'm gonna put this, and you're gonna kind of lay out the website differently based on this grid system, table grid system. That's basically what the grid does. And you can say, hey, put this in column one, have it take 3 columns, have this take 2 columns, put it on this row one, so forth. So you're basically rearranging items and saying, put this here, put this there, have it occupy out of the 5 fractional of the website, have it take the first 2 fraction, so forth. That's basically what the grid is. And there are use cases where grid can be very powerful, especially when you're creating a single page application. Some of the grid concept could be helpful. I personally think you should master Flex and get really comfortable. And when you're creating more of a two-dimensional site with where you want to put things like on the top right corner and then on the bottom right, and you're using an exact grid system. Again, using grid could be helpful. So the reason I introduce this is just so that you're familiar with what it is and maybe you play around with it a little bit. You don't have to become expert on it. I think you gotta be good at using Flex, but we just don't want you to not know what grid is and be caught off guard. It's still helpful to know what are some of these things that are out there that people are using, and who knows, for your website that you're creating, especially if you're creating a single page application, you might be thinking, you know what, I could use Flex to do it. But maybe on this particular case, I'll be using grid because this is more of a two-dimensional approach, and I feel like I can just do an easier job structuring the website, laying things out using a grid system. Okay, so don't spend too much time, just maybe spend half an hour just reading about CSS grid system, understand that some people use it, but again, I would say majority of the developers probably use Flex more. Of course, people would argue about this in many forms, but I would say it's not a bad assumption to say Flex is probably more commonly used than Grid, although each has its own use cases. But again, don't spend too much time studying about it. As you do some of the assignments, you will get better with Flex and a little bit of Grid. But again, in this course, I want you to focus more on Flex.